Peter D. Bell Rule of Law Program. We are excited today to host a discussion on bridging the divides at the Summit of the Americas. Especially want to thank our friends at Walmart for helping make this event happen. And to get us started, very happy to introduce Jason Marzak from the Atlantic Council's Latin America Center to frame the discussion, and then we'll continue with our panelists. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's great to see you, everyone, on a Monday morning. Today we're talking about how to bridge multiple interests to achieve real, tangible results on anti-corruption. When I think about bridging interests and bridging divides, I can't think of a more opportune time on a Monday morning when the U.S. government is currently shut down because we're trying to figure out here how to bridge our own divides. As Michael said, I'm Jason Marzak. I'm the director of the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council, and I want to first of all thank my good friend Michael for hosting today's discussion here at the Inter-American Dialogue. It's a real pleasure for me to have the Atlantic Council and the American Dialogue be working together on this critical project. In Latin America, as all of you know, 2018 is going to be and can be, I think, a seminal year for Brazil, for Colombia, for Mexico, for Argentina. The region's biggest democracies find themselves at an inflection point for strengthening institutions and cementing their role in the broader global order. And this year's summit in Peru provides one such, I think, incredibly critical opportunity. It's a time to address the historic fight against corruption that's taking place all across the region. As all of you know, corruption is nothing new. It's nothing new to the Americas, it's nothing new to the world. But what is new is this awakening to combating corruption. People on the streets protesting, government officials from former presidents to local authorities being arrested and convicted, and executives who have engaged in corrupt activities now facing their own reckoning. Clearly, much work remains to be done, but at least with scandals such as Odebrecht, Petrobras, reverberating across the hemisphere, we may yet be at the point where action is possible amid mounting frustration and recognition of how dramatically corruption holds back societies. Whether we're talking about grand corruption at the political level, petty corruption at the bureaucratic level, the costs are enormous on sustainable and inclusive growth. And the broader effects are insurmountable. The broader effects on how public goods are transmitted to the citizenry, the broader effects on the trust in government, the legitimacy of government because of corruption, and the effects, as I'm sure our panel will talk about today as well, on foreign and direct investment and the region's appeal for broader investment. So with elections taking place in numerous countries across the hemisphere, we are at a moment not only to renew awareness of the cost of corruption, but to take concrete, actionable steps to combat this ongoing challenge. And that's why the Atlantic Council and the Inter-American Dialogue paired up to develop a project. We're working together with partners across Latin America to combat corruption. And especially in the context of the summit, those efforts that require cross-border collaboration are critical. And here we have tremendously benefited from the partnership of Transparency International. As we look to a transparent and just future, we must embrace the opportunity to continue working with our partners to address corruption in Latin America in 2018 and beyond. The Atlantic Council, we did a report last year on Latin America 2030, projecting out what the region could look like at that point, 13 years down the road. And when we looked at 2030, we saw corruption in a scenario of an illicit world afloat, where corruption is part of that illicit world, that there's a potential of FDI inflows as a percentage of GDP decreasing by 50% relative to what was expected if we don't address not only corruption, but the many other factors that lead to a more illicit world. So the challenge is really upon all of us today to prevent that from happening. At the request of the Peruvian government, our three organizations, the Atlantic Council, American Dialogue, and Transparency International, we partnered with organizations across the region to generate specific concrete actions against corruption at the Summit of the Americas. As part of this work, and at the urging of the Peruvian Foreign Ministry, we convened a group in Lima over the fall to begin the process of generating specific concrete actions that were then presented to government officials. This is an important step, and we also benefited from some members of the Americas Business Dialogue in participating in those Lima talks. And today, the next hour or so, what we're going to be doing is we're going to focus further in the direction of how to work across both the Americas Business Dialogue, the Civil Society Foundation, and the Young Americas Forum on how stakeholders can advance anti-corruption goals in the context of the summit. Before passing the floor back to Michael, I'd like to first thank each of our panelists for joining us for this important conversation, with a special thank you to Walmart as well for their role in making today's event possible. I'd also like to thank a couple of people in the audience today. Looking over at Judge Mark Wolf, I'm looking at Alec Watson, and a couple of people who aren't in the audience, Bob Gelbert, Bernie Aronson, who have been working with the Atlantic Council and the American Dialogue from the inception on creating this project and moving it forward. We are thrilled to be engaging with them and with all of our counterparts across the hemisphere to take concrete, actionable steps as we work toward this year's summit outcomes. If you'd like to also follow today's discussion, you can take out your phones, but only for one reason, and that's to tweet about this discussion, not to check on what's happening on Capitol Hill. That hashtag is 8 with the Roman numeral 8 Summit Peru. So with that, Michael, I turn the floor to you and to our panel. Thank you very much.
Terrific. Thanks, Jason. That was great. I really think you reminded us of really what's at stake here. So can you all hear me? Now can you? All right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Again, it's great to partner with the Atlantic Council on this initiative, and we're looking forward to a great discussion. So today's discussion on bridging the divides at the Summit of the Americas is part of the work that Jason described in trying to inform the policy discussion around anti-corruption at the Summit of the Americas. As I think many of you know, Peru has chosen an ambitious, daring, and timely theme for the summit, democratic governance against corruption. The governments of the Americas are busy negotiating, trying to find their way to consensus on what the summit will actually try to accomplish to combat corruption in the hemisphere. But they're not the only ones. So over the past few summits, there have been a number of consultative mechanisms that have been developed in the context of the summit. This includes the Americas Business Dialogue, the Civil Society Summit, and the Young Americas Forum. And these stakeholder groups are also very involved in developing policy recommendations on what the summit should do to strengthen the hemispheric effort to combat corruption. Indeed, the theme of democratic governance against corruption has provoked strong interest and high expectations among these different groups and sectors. So we are very fortunate today to have representatives of these 3 summit processes, and well, in fact, 4, including the formal government summit. I'll just introduce them briefly. To my immediate right is Mercedes de Freitas Merchi, who is Executive Director of Transparencia Venezuela. Welby Lehman is Senior Director of Global Government Affairs at Walmart. Rosario Diaz Gabarito is the President and founder of the Millennials Movement. And Ana Rosa Valdivieso is the Peruvian ambassador to the Organization of American States. We have asked each of our panelists to speak for 5 to 7 minutes, providing opening remarks on what they and their colleagues in their summit processes are proposing and expecting of the Summit of the Americas, after which I will moderate a discussion, and we'll have plenty of time to take your questions and comments. We will do this in Spanglish, so if anybody needs translation, we're trying out something new today. There's a phone number on the screen with a passcode, so you can just use your cell phone to call in if you need translation from Spanish to English. So with that, Welby, let's start with you. Walmart is very involved with the summit as chair of the Americas Business Dialogue Regulatory Cooperation Working Group. But you've also taken a strong interest in what we're trying to do today, which is bridge the discussion between what the governments are doing, what the business community is talking about, what civil society is interested in, and what the youth in the hemisphere are focused on. So can you tell us a bit about Walmart's interest in the summit process, your involvement with the ABD, the genesis of your desire to kind of help to bridge this conversation, and specific anti-corruption proposals that are coming out of your work with the Regulatory Cooperation Working Group?
Great. Everyone who's here is part of what I think as a very special moment in the summit planning process, because what we're attempting to do today is build a bridge among three erstwhile separate consultative mechanisms: civil society, the Young Americas Forum, and the Americas Business Dialogue, representing the business community, have separately been working very intensively. We on the Americas Business Dialogue side have had thousands of companies in some ways involved directly and indirectly in preparing recommendations related to anti-corruption. But the more that we worked on our various tracks, the more we realized that the real benefit here is in the trans-sectoral opportunity that we have to come together here at this table. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing all three consultative mechanisms come together and attempt to build a bridge among us so that with greater credibility, we can go to the heads of state at the Summit of the Americas process and present recommendations that have the support across all three of those sectors, and that we are all committed to then helping the heads of state with going forward. So I think you're here for an important moment. To go back and link it to one of my favorite novels I didn't know at the time that I read this book that Thornton Wilder had never actually been to Peru, but he wrote a novel, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, about Peru and bridges. So let me just read you a little tiny bit, and then I'll make an analogy to it. On Friday noon, July the 20th, 1714, the finest bridge in all Peru broke and precipitated 5 travelers into the gulf below. This bridge was on the high road between Lima and Cusco, and hundreds of persons passed over it every day. Horses and coaches and chairs had to go down hundreds of feet below and pass over the narrow torrent on rafts, but no one, not even the viceroy, had descended with the baggage rather than cross by the famous bridge of San Luis Rey. It was unthinkable that it should break. The moment a Peruvian heard of the accident, he signed himself and made a calculation as to how recently he had crossed by it and how soon he had intended crossing it again. They had the hallucination of seeing themselves falling into the gulf. Everyone was deeply impressed, but only one person did anything about it, and that was Brother Juniper. That's the beginning of the novel. I want all of us to be Brother Juniper. What we're talking about is a bridge among these sectors with regards to anti-corruption that's fallen long ago. And what we're attempting to do, and what I come proposing, is that we build a bridge, a trans-sectoral commitment in the summit process over, well, where do you build a bridge? Where is it most necessary? Where the river is roughest, where the rapids are. Well, where are the rapids in anti-corruption? Where are the actual spaces, the actual processes, the actual regulatory areas where we most see corruption? Well, thanks to Odebrecht, we know one of them is public contracting, right? And another one that Walmart has had to navigate the rapids on, and so it's one that we've been especially interested in, is permitting. And here it says how the average citizen had this hallucination of seeing themselves falling into the gulf. One of the advantages of focusing in part on what are the best practices to actually address corruption in the permitting context is it's in the context of permitting that the average citizen often has the hallucination of falling into the gulf himself, right? Try building a house in Latin America and getting your permits and standing in the line that never moves until you go in the back door. So permitting is really promising in that sense of harnessing that empathy that's described here by Thornton Wilder with regards to those who have experienced the lack of a bridge the one that we're trying to build. But this morning we had sort of a pre-discussion among panelists and some of the people who have been supporting them on their recommendations. And I mentioned permitting, and one of Merchi's supporters in the broader Transparency International world said, well, yeah, permitting, but public contracting is really important too. Right now, I'll make the commitment to demonstrate how important this trans-sectoral idea is, to say, we've spent the last year and a half working on a recommendation, and I'm going to describe it now, on how to address corruption and permitting. But all it takes is sitting down together at the table, like we did for a few minutes before getting up here, to see how close we were to already being on the same stage, on the same page, to realize, oh, well, what I'm about to say is, if Transparency International thinks that public contracting is the key, let's do them both. So that's what I'm going to propose right now. It's from the America's Business Dialogue context, we are taking a recommendation, and in particular, Guatemala is one of the countries that's taken the lead on this recommendation, and that is going to present it to the Peruvian government as a proposal to include in the heads of state agenda, to create a certification. So we're all familiar with the certification process for architects, for engineers, for buildings on sustainability, LEED. The LEED certification has been very effective at increasing the importance of sustainability in that context. So the thought would be to do a certification, a modular certification on anti-corruption and good governance for those politicians, students who want to work in the public sector, public servants, agencies that work on these matters, to be able to get a certification and best practices with regards to several elements of where corruption presents itself. So one module, and it was the module that we've been focusing on up through today, has been on permitting. So what would be permitting best practices that the private sector could support the public sector in making a commitment to? Things like the idea that mitigation requests by municipalities should be germane to the impact of a work. So that's the certification process that we came proposing. We had already designed it in a modular fashion, such that after that first module, you could expand it to other anti-corruption and good governance elements. But having heard what Transparency International said before we took the stage, I think that we should right off the bat start with two modules, one in public contracting and one in permitting, two of the sort of like the high end and the low end, the sort of part of the anti-corruption space that the average citizen has experience with, and then that they read about in the papers, that has so captured the imagination of people in the Lava Jato context. So I'm glad to talk more about the specifics of what a certification could look like, but I wanted to just start by saying, by showing how already our getting together across the sectors is having an impact on our work, because it's allowing us to see how to holistically bring our work to the heads of state.
Terrific. Thanks, Bobby. Merci, welcome. You lead Transparencia Venezuela, which is the TI chapter in Venezuela. TI is probably the best known corruption-fighting NGO in the world, so you bring great experience and technical expertise to this issue. You're also leading, together with Maria Jose Eva, who's over here, from the International Budget Partnership, one of the civil society coalitions, a coalition focused on transparency, open government, and public participation in the summit context. So tell us, if you could, what some of the proposals are that are coming out of that coalition, and to the extent you can, react to Welby's evolving suggestion on certification, initially focused on permitting, but potentially flexible to also include some of the issues related to grant corruption that TI has been very focused on.
In Spanish.
Yeah, en español. So again, the phone number is on the screen for those who need translation.
People speak Spanish?
Mario Vargas Llosa, en un artículo hace ya varios meses, creo que más de un año, dijo que que América Latina le tenía que agradecer o hacer una estatua a Odebrecht porque había levantado el tema de la lucha contra la corrupción. Esto es mejor. Bueno, yo no sé si hay que hacerle una estatua a Odebrecht, yo la verdad la quisiera destruir completamente, pero la verdad es que sí le tenemos que agradecer al gobierno de Perú que haya elegido este tema para la Cumbre de las Américas 2018. Le queremos agradecer también al diálogo interamericano que permite hacer un trabajo distinto al que veníamos realizando en las cumbres anteriores. Desde la sociedad civil veníamos muy, con bajas expectativas con respecto a las cumbres, porque, eran resoluciones, discursos, pero de allí al cumplimiento, pues había un trecho importante. Por eso, la posibilidad de que tengamos una discusión previa acerca de los temas y las propuestas, buscando, como ya habíamos dicho, bajar a propuestas que sean medibles, que se puedan aprobar, que se puedan implementar y que se puedan medir, como bien decía el embajador mexicano hace un rato en una sesión que teníamos de desayuno, puede hacer la diferencia, ¿no? Y podríamos trabajar todos los temas y llegar a algunos acuerdos importantes antes de la cumbre que nos permitan a lo mejor tener más impacto y más posibilidades de implementación. Nuestra coalición, por lo que hemos podido conversar, está formado por más de 45 organizaciones, están todos los capítulos de Transparencia Internacional en la región, están las organizaciones de IBP, de International Budget Project, también de la región, y otras organizaciones, y hay de todo. Hay organizaciones que trabajan el tema de género, transparencia y género, forestal, sustentabilidad, juventud, justicia. Es una coalición bastante nutrida y creo que el reto de nuestra coalición precisamente es poder presentar unos temas cuyo impacto sea para todos nuestros temas, ¿no? Con lo cual el reto no es hablar de temas específicos por la temática de las organizaciones, sino por el interés de la región. En ese sentido, tenemos algunos temas en los que hasta ahora hemos coincidido y algunas propuestas generales en las que creemos que vamos a tener bastante acuerdo entre todas y podamos presentar. El primer tema, por supuesto, en eso coincidimos con el documento de avance que ha tenido el Inter-American Dialogue en las reuniones previas, tiene que ver con acceso a la información pública, transparencia, libertad de expresión, open data, y allí las propuestas tienen que ver, por supuesto, hay que mejorar y profundizar las leyes en las que América ha avanzado, salvo Venezuela. Por supuesto, hay que hacer propuestas para profundizar ese marco legal en lo referente a mayor autonomía, independencia y poder a los órganos garantes, para ampliar profundamente el acceso a la información, el derecho y la obligación a todos los poderes públicos y no solamente al Ejecutivo, como aparece en varias legislaciones de la región. Ampliar y tener claridad en lo que tiene que ver con los límites entre derecho a la privacidad y el derecho a acceso a la información, donde se producen interesantes tensiones permanentemente. Hay, por supuesto, que avanzar en open data y todo lo que significa la posibilidad de tener suficiente información que podamos utilizar para medir, para evaluar, para hacer rendición de cuentas, para hacer contraloría social. Hay que diseñar políticas claras de medición de esto en la región en forma comparada y todo lo que tiene que ver, por supuesto, con la garantía de la libertad de expresión para medios, periodistas y demás investigadores. El segundo tema, para nosotros vital, central, yo creo que si tuviéramos que elegir un tema sería el tema de la necesidad de autonomía, independencia y fortaleza, capacidad de la justicia, de los sistemas de administración de justicia En la región, la justicia, la posibilidad de tener real justicia en la región es la posibilidad de realmente acabar con la impunidad o por lo menos avanzar en la lucha contra la impunidad en la región. Y en los temas de justicia, no solamente mejorar los procesos de selección, que todos lo sabemos, está en las convenciones, sino también hay dos temas adicionales importantes y uno es que estamos atrasados en la protección de denunciantes en temas de corrupción. La OEA tiene un borrador de ley, pero el borrador de ley todavía no está, digamos, muy católico, o sea, no, le falta contenido allí como para de verdad ser un órgano que se pueda aplicar a gran escala y no a los casos de grandes casos de corrupción o narcotráfico y crimen organizado. Y el otro tema tiene que ver con que tenemos, lo decía hace un rato, tenemos que aprender de la experiencia de la MASIC y de la CICIC de Guatemala, unas experiencias en donde la región, la OEA en un nivel y las Naciones Unidas en otro, entraron, participaron y están retando a los estados que tienen una debilidad importante del sistema judicial. Creo que allí tendríamos que construir algunas cosas, hay países que lo necesitan más que otros, por supuesto el mío es el que más lo necesita, no tengo que agrandar allí. Pero hace falta hace falta incorporar en los sistemas de administración de justicia grupos, espacios, secciones, cuerpos dedicados en exclusiva a la lucha contra la corrupción, con muchísima más capacidad y muchísimos más recursos. El tema de contrataciones, bueno, pues creo que, creo que tú lo avanzaste bien, sin embargo, para nosotros el tema de las contrataciones, si bien es el espacio donde más corrupción se ve a nivel mundial, estamos lejos de llegar a unas posibilidades reales de limpiar o de clarificar, transparentar los procesos. Vemos que empresas que internacionalmente son banderas en lucha contra la corrupción aceptan cláusulas de confidencialidad en contratos. Por ejemplo, para no hablar de la región, la empresa que hace el papel de seguridad para los pasaportes en Venezuela no hay pasaportes, eso es otro drama, resulta que es una empresa pública alemana. Entonces, ¿cómo se explica que la empresa pública alemana no quiera dar información acerca de los contratos y por qué aceptan cláusulas de confidencialidad? Creo que la región tiene mucho que decir y hay un intercambio de información acerca de contratos entre países, empresas y sector público que vale la pena empezar a ver y hacer propuestas concretas para avanzar. Presupuesto abierto y participativo. Para IVP y los capítulos de transparencia internacional, seguir al dinero es vital. Publish What You Pay, hay organizaciones que vienen trabajando en eso desde hace mucho tiempo. El 30 de enero salen los resultados del año pasado de la encuesta de presupuesto abierto a nivel mundial y va a decir muchas cosas interesantes para América Latina. Creo que allí vamos a poder presentar unas propuestas concretas y tiene que ver con que la decisión sobre el dinero tiene que poner al ciudadano en el centro de esa decisión y es mucho más que transparentar solamente y de abrir las puertas para que los ciudadanos participen a lo mejor en una parte menor de la distribución del presupuesto, tiene que ver con la evaluación total y en todas las fases del presupuesto. La cooperación internacional, con respecto a la cooperación internacional, nos gusta la mitad de la propuesta que ha salido de las reuniones previas de Inter-American Dialogue y nos gusta mucho. Y es la propuesta que tiene que ver con proponer la creación de una relatoría en la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos, una relatoría que vea permanentemente la relación perversa, el daño que está causando la corrupción en la violación de derechos humanos. Esa es una relación que se ha visto poco, pero que en los últimos años se ha empezado a ver más. Hay varias organizaciones, varios capítulos que ya estamos llevando casos tanto a la Comisión Interamericana como a Ginebra, al Alto Comisionado y a la Comisión de Derechos Humanos de Naciones Unidas. Y allí se está avanzando y se está viendo claramente el impacto que tiene. Pero en este sentido también es importante recordar los 4 elementos de la gran corrupción. Ahí, la gran corrupción tiene participa las altas esferas del poder. El segundo elemento es que impacta a gran cantidad de ciudadanos. El otro elemento es que tiene alta impunidad. Y el cuarto tiene que ver con que no se queda en las fronteras de un país. Por eso es tan importante trabajar estos temas en cooperación. Y hace falta entonces empezar a revisar cómo se pueden apoyar convenciones distintas, Convención de Naciones Unidas contra la Corrupción y Convención del Crimen Organizado, contra el crimen organizado, donde la Convención de Palermo podría permitir juicios transnacionales o juicios extraterritoriales, que por ejemplo en el caso de Odebrecht precisamente podría ser un tema en el que podríamos estar innovando. Para terminar, un tema que va a ser muy difícil de trabajar lograr apoyo de muchos países y tiene que ver con transparentar las campañas electorales y los partidos políticos, no solamente el financiamiento, sino sus intereses. Y hay un tema que nosotros lo vemos desde partidos políticos y campañas, pero que quizás es para todos los sectores, que es el beneficiario final. Ese tema de beneficiario final está pendiente en América. Nosotros, bueno, claro, por supuesto, ustedes saben, Venezuela tiene el extremo de que nosotros no sabemos ni siquiera quiénes son los dueños de los medios de comunicación, pero en general este problema está causando daños en toda América Latina. Yo lo dejaría ahí. Esos son más o menos los temas que estamos proponiendo.
Muchas gracias, Merchi. So Merchi made reference to an Inter-American dialogue document, and I just want to clarify what that is. The dialogue with the Atlantic Council and TI hosted in Lima last October a meeting of about 25 anti-corruption experts from around the region, and those experts produced a declaration, which I think there are copies of out at the desk out here, but if not, it's on our website, so you're welcome to take a look at that. Rosario, let me turn to you for a youth perspective. And Jason made reference to the anti-corruption groundswell that we've seen in the region over the last few years, and youth have been very much at the forefront of that, from the streets of Sao Paulo to the Plaza Mayor in Guatemala City, and certainly in Peru, where you are. So tell us a little bit about the Young Americas Forum, what it is, and how you're participating, and what you and your colleagues are hoping to see from the summit generally, and specifically on the issue of anti-corruption.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone to be here. I'm going to challenge myself, so I'm going to speak in English. Well, I would like to start with one number. Last year, with the organization I lead, the Millennials Movement, we ran a consultation for youth from the civil society. Well, actually, it was an open consultation for civil society, but the 90% of participants were youth. And when we asked them what was the biggest problem to achieve sustainable development, because this consultation was part of the consultative process for the high-level political forum at the UN, they said corruption. I will just start with that, and then I will go back to that topic in a little bit. Jumping into the previous presentations, I would like to say that when we think about common goals, when we think about building bridges, we need to realize that we are all looking for prosperity. Independently, if you are from the civil society sector, if you are from the private sector, if you're a citizen, or if you are part of a government, we all look for prosperity. And this is something that needs to have an holistic approach. We all have different agendas. We all have different goals. We all have different strategies to implement our actions in different communities or across the region. But what do we want? I think, or from my point of view, what we want are prosperous communities that can actually buy products, that can actually protect the environment, that can actually have a voice, that can actually have human rights to be respected. That is what we want. In the frame of the Young Americans Forum, actually an initiative that is being running since 12 years ago, led by the Young American Business Trust based here in Washington, D.C., sorry. This is a very inclusive and participative process for youth. And the most important thing is that when you think about youth, you might be thinking, oh, then it's youth from civil society, students, ish. No, we actually make a call for youth from all different sectors. Youth that actually participate in civil society, academics, entrepreneurs, young people who's interested on public policies, or simply young people who wants to have a voice in a process like this one. This Young Americans Forum has, and I actually have some pictures of this. This Young Americans Forum has two components. The first one is the participation component, where we have a strategy to make a consultative process all across the region, not only in the national level, but also in the local level. Remember, if we only talk about general numbers and general statistics, and we only go to the national or hemispheric approach, we might be forgetting and hiding some inequalities. So the strategy of the Young Americans Forum is to reach to different young people all across the region in local communities to lead spaces where they can have a voice, where they can articulate with the private sector, where they can articulate with the civil society, where they can articulate with the local authorities. This part of this component of the Young Americas Forum is actually self-funded. So what does it mean? Young people in Peru, in the province where I come from, Arequipa, they are all leading this process. You know, and how do they get the resources? They are making alliances with the Association of Hotel Representatives in the city. So what do? They have a location, that is a resource. So we have a resource that is effectively used, and we have more efficiency in the way of how we use the resources. And then we call to the local authority, and they provide, for example, the coffee break, and we have the universities calling young people to participate. And that's how we start building bridges, because if we are gonna talk about corruption, if we are gonna talk about building bridges, we need to go local, we need to go down. Where is corruption? Corruption is not only the biggest scenario. Corruption is on the street when people brace a police officer because they just went across a red light. Corruption is in schools, in universities, where a student has to pay the professors to pass a course. Corruption is in every single sphere in our daily lives. And in this region, I don't know if to say that, but with sort of weak democracies. And I don't mean weak democracies because of the fact that we cannot vote. I say weak democracies because I think we really need to work on transparency processes. And these participative processes can actually reach these guys where they have not only, they put not only their opinions, but also proposals to make a change. The second component of the Young Forum of the Americas is the implementation one. The implementation one is call to action. Okay, we participate, we raise our voices, we say what we want, we say what we think, we make proposals. But now what? We need to go to concrete actions. The Young Americas Forum provided a space for young people from all over the region to participate of the TIC Americas. Is a competition where they can apply and they can present innovating solutions to tackle different issues in their communities. This time, we are focusing on nutrition, sustainable development, and gender equality or women empowerment. And this other component actually gives some seed funding to the finalists or to the winners of this competition to implement or to push these startups and take the next level. So when we talk about youth participation, we are talking about not just raising our voices, but taking concrete action. And I think that is one of the biggest characteristics of the millennials. And I know some people have some struggle with the millennials because we have a different approach about things, but we are very actions oriented. But then you might be wondering, okay, that's amazing, Rosie, but how does this actually contribute with tackling corruption in the region? And that's where we start. All this process is not just an internal process. Actually, the Young American Business Trust present the different outcomes of the consultative process with the Greek. And another thing is that these spaces allow youth to start an empowerment process. I'm not saying that we are empowering them. We are giving them the tools to empower themselves. And how this starts, because they feel they are important. They feel that they are participating in a process that can actually make a change in their countries and in their communities. It's not just the fact of participating at a big conference. It's also the fact that if we contribute to this big conference, and if we publish the outcomes of these consultative processes, and then we bring them down for that hemispheric space to our local governor, to our mayor, we have the chance to be heard, because they will know that it's not just youth saying, oh, we want this, or we are proposing this. That is an outcome of a formal conversation led by the heads of states that is brought to the local level, where the things happen, where the budgets are actually used, you know? So young people get empowered, and they start participating. They start demanding. They start creating or opening spaces for their peers, for other young people to get educated, to understand that their role as citizens, independently of where they work, it's important. One of the examples we have here in El Salvador is a public policy lab. Young people are talking about how to create, how to contribute, how to have incidence on the public policy process of their country. That is one of the outcomes of the Young Americans Forum. We don't want young people for the picture. We want young people to lead, or better say, to co-lead the development processes of their community with transparency processes in the middle. Another example. Oh, my other example, where it is. But I will tell you. The other example is one lead in Panama, but Panama Joven. Panama Joven is Panama por la Educación. Panama por la Educación is a platform of young people who actually participate on the previous Young Americans Forum, and they find out that education was a pillar for development and contribute with the democracies in their countries. They got together. They promote different kind of education, from the formal to informal education. However, they partnered with an organization in Chile, Fondo Chile. What they are doing now, they are running a program to build the capacities of young people in Chile and Panama regarding public policies. So you need to understand at this very end of the conversation, or my contribution, that we are now in the sphere, or in the age of information. You need to understand as well that this generation of young people is the most specialized people, or young people, that we have ever had in the history of humanity. And we are the most connected ones. We are able to organize massive marches, and because we in Sao Paulo, we had that some years ago. Young people organizing themselves without knowing each other through social media to demand justice, to demand transparency, to demand actions against corruption. We have it in Peru now. In this complex context for the region, with the Odebrecht cases, with the Lavallato cases, how these young people is taking action. We go to the streets, we participate of the non-regular processes of participation. We go to the streets, we have a voice, we use our social media, but we also need to be included in the regular process, in the formal process. And sometimes that is very hard. So the fact that now we are able to put different elements together, it's very important for us. Because as member of the Team Peru for the youth engagement, I can really tell you that in a very short period of time, we were able to promote 28 local dialogues in Peru. And let me tell you, these 28 local dialogues have around 100 local allies to be executed. And you have more than, I don't know, 2,000 young people raising their voices in their communities. So that is where I will finish my intervention, and I will really looking forward for some questions at the end of this presentation or the panel.
Great. Thank you, Rosario. That was terrific. You're inspiring, and your English is perfect. So, Ambassador, your government has the difficult task of incorporating input from 35 countries and not a few, as you can see, civil society, business, and youth groups and perspectives. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're hoping to do that and where you're landing and where we go from here?
Thank you, Michael. Is this working? Okay. Good morning to all. I'd like to thank again the dialogue for making these type of meetings that I think are very useful for the preparation process of the summit. Also, I think there's hope for all of us. When I hear presentations like the one she has done, I think there's hope for my country and for our countries, and to feel this determination and ideas and participation. I think I'm going to go back to Spanish to make some kind of equal balance in Spanglish, okay, and tell you a little bit about the preparation process of the summit and what the Peruvian government wants to achieve. El gobierno del Perú escogió el tema de gobernanza, ¿no? Fortalecimiento de la gobernanza y lucha anticorrupción, porque actualmente es el tema más importante, ¿no? La corrupción realmente está destrozando instituciones, está haciendo inviable el desarrollo, no solamente por el impacto que tiene a nivel de objetivos de desarrollo y del PBI, sino también a nivel de cómo se ha creado una debilidad institucional en todas las esferas, no solamente para luchar anticorrupción, sino para hacer posible la implementación de políticas públicas, ¿no? Es algo, la corrupción está poniendo en riesgo a toda una región, a todo un país, y esto es algo que tiene que ser visto como una prioridad en la mayor parte de nuestros gobiernos. Es verdad que el escándalo de Odebrecht, en el que están involucrados 14 países y no sabemos si más, ya directamente dice algo sobre el nivel de la macrocorrupción, pero también, como ella mencionaba, hay una microcorrupción, es una microcorrupción cotidiana que tiene que ver también con ineficiencias de gestión pública y que podrían ser superadas, ¿no? El proceso de la cumbre tiene varios actores, ¿no? Están los estados, pero también está sociedad civil, están los empresarios y está la juventud. Normalmente todos ellos han participado para dar insumos a los estados para que en el documento final o en los compromisos finales estos sean informados por todos los sectores. Se han venido realizando reuniones ya, y ahora en febrero vamos a tener la primera reunión de negociación de los estados en Lima, y para ello ya se han recibido insumos de sociedad civil, de la juventud, del diálogo interamericano de negocios y de los estados. En líneas generales, porque en realidad, como les digo, recién se va a empezar a negociar y estoy muy contenta de decirlo, la mayor parte de las propuestas que se han presentado ahora en la mesa están incluidas. No de esa manera tan específica, pero estamos hablando de acciones de prevención que incluyen transparencia, acceso a la información, iniciativas sobre datos abiertos, por un lado, también de protección de denunciantes. Esto es un tema que se tiene que desarrollar a través de una ley más actualizada y también adoptada por la mayor parte de países, y protección de periodistas, porque la libertad de prensa es algo fundamental para la lucha anticorrupción. Creemos que la educación es un tema importante porque esto es a futuro. ¿Qué podemos decir en el sistema educativo sobre valores, sobre ética, sobre probidad, sobre integridad? Y también la igualdad de género. Sociedades más democráticas son sociedades más igualitarias y esto puede incidir directamente en fortalecimiento institucional y lucha anticorrupción. Y después llegamos a aspectos que son, han sido mencionados también acá, financiamiento de la política. Este es un tema central para muchos países. ¿Cómo hacer para que los partidos, ¿no?, o los grupos que participan en la política declaren cuáles son sus ingresos, que todos estos ingresos para campañas sean bancarizados, que sea más claro todo el proceso de elecciones. Este es un tema que ha sido mencionado por algunos países, así como el tema de que no se permita que participen ni en la función pública ni en procesos políticos aquellas personas que ya han sido condenadas por corrupción o por crimen organizado transnacional. Otros temas relevantes se refieren a infraestructura y acá también hay un vínculo, un puente, como dice, con el tema de infraestructura y contratos. Quisiéramos ver en los contratos de infraestructura, en las concesiones, cláusulas específicas de anticorrupción y también en el tema de manejo de proyectos de reconstrucción, en todo lo que es desastres naturales. También tiene que haber un énfasis en que los recursos no sean desviados a otros de esos, que sean usados para eso y cómo se controla y cómo se fiscaliza eso. Como se ha mencionado, el Poder Judicial, las instituciones judiciales son muy importantes en todo eso, no solamente por las leyes, sino porque se tiene que buscar que hayan cuerpos de élite, ya sea a nivel de las fiscalías, del Poder Judicial y otros actores, para hacer realmente un seguimiento de los procesos corruptos en nuestros países. Y también una mayor cooperación de estas instituciones con inteligencia financiera. Creemos que acá, como decía Merche, ¿dónde está el dinero? Sí, ¿dónde está el dinero? Y esto es la única manera es que haya más cooperación entre todos los países y entre todos los actores vinculados a una vigilancia del proceso. La recuperación de activos también es un tema que ha sido mencionado por muchos países. Creemos que también hay un tema de cooperación abierto con el MESICIC, que puede actualizar algunos de los esquemas y de las herramientas que usa, pero también el gran tema del puente, ¿no? Nosotros estamos convencidos que la anticorrupción no es un tema solo de los estados, ¿no? Y en ese sentido, claro, tiene que haber este diálogo entre sociedad civil, entre empresas, entre juventud, y lograr compromisos que sean de todos. Compromisos que sean de todos, ya sea un compromiso del diálogo interamericano frente a los estados sobre conducta de las empresas a nivel de contrataciones, etcétera, de la juventud. Creemos que eso le podría dar realce al proceso y también atender un poco la preocupación ciudadana. Y finalmente quisiera decir algo sobre ya el proceso de cumbre en sí. ¿Cómo va a ser la cumbre en abril? O sea, ¿qué cosa es lo que se quiere? La presidencia quisiera un compromiso concreto y de consenso de todos los países participantes. Esto es lo que nos gustaría. Pero si no, también estaríamos llanos a lograr compromisos parciales apoyados por ciertos países. Entonces, en este primer GRIC de negociación, que es en realidad el GRIC es el grupo preparatorio de la cumbre que se va a realizar en Lima, vamos a empezar a debatir, pero ya de manera conjunta, las ideas recibidas, porque el Perú como presidencia ha recibido todas estas ideas, son compartidas por algunos países, otras no, en fin, otras tienen otras prioridades, y esto es lo que se va a empezar a ver. Probablemente haya otro GRIC de negociación en marzo para finalmente llegar a la cumbre. Y entre tanto, esperamos que la sociedad civil, las empresas, juventud, informen a sus estados, a sus gobiernos, para que nos traigan a estos GRICs las propuestas recibidas, ¿no? Esto sería la manera más fácil. Y agradecer nuevamente el diálogo que ha permitido un espacio realmente de conversación y de consulta sobre prioridades en la anticorrupción.
Great.
Gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador. Your Spanish is excellent.
Gracias.
Let me just let me stay with you for a second, because I know I don't want to make this a discussion about Peruvian politics, but I know there are some questions about the way in which recent events in Peru may or may not have impacted the summit plans and the summit agenda. Obviously, you have a new foreign minister, and the former foreign minister was such a driver of the process and of this issue in particular. So can you just give us quickly an update on kind of how things stand at the foreign ministry, and whether you expect any changes based on the domestic political situation in your country?
Thank you, Michael. No, we don't expect any changes. Actually, there have been some declarations by our new minister, Cayetana Aljovin, on the issue. We really support the summit process. We are committed with the fight against corruption. We know it's vital for Peru. And though it's difficult when we have investigations going on and when we have presidents in jail, etc. But the commitment of the government is there, and I can reassure you that we're going to follow up with the process and with this commitment.
Great.
Thank you.
Great to hear. And hopefully the Pope also left his blessing for the summit process when he was
That's
in
why.
Peru this week. Welby, let me turn back to you, and just I would love your reaction on kind of what you've heard in terms of the ideas and the proposals. Are you more optimistic, less optimistic about the chance to kind of build these bridges and this consensus? And what do you think needs to be done kind of operationally to bring these different constituent groups together?
Yeah, very optimistic. I'll just go back and try to pull in civil society and Young America's comments and apply them to the One America's Business Dialogue recommendation that I mentioned, just to show what I think is the natural cross-fertilization here. So, again, just to summarize, the America's Business Dialogue has put together one of its many recommendations is to create a certification process for permitting best practices, so that in one of the areas in which corruption is most common, you would create an alternative to the traditional corrupt processes. And now, thanks to Transparency International's input into that, we had always thought of it as modular, so we think, let's do both modules. Let's do a public contracting module, let's do a permitting module, and then once those succeed, add more modules. But now what I hear in this conversation right now, you've mentioned the importance of education. For a certification, one of the greatest demandeurs for certifications are, in fact, those in the educational system. And so in order to really get early adoption with an intensity of participation, we would need for the certification to become popular with students, for those set of people, for example, who want to go into the public sector, and in turn, we would be actually facilitating that generational transfer of millennials and others who are moving into government service now, and whom we'd be equipping to demonstrate through a certification their commitment to better governmental practices. So I think there's sort of a natural commitment there. You also mentioned that there's a self-funding mechanism to a lot of your work. I think there, again, it demonstrates sort of, following up on what Ambassador Valdivieso said, that it's important that all the sectors make commitments. One of the things that we, as the private sector, can do is provide funding into a lot of this type of work, because the self-financing is one of the competitive advantages of the private sector is being able to help finance these types of things as they grow roots. Then on the civil society side, I mean, basically we've within the private sector already done sort of a socialization process where we've gone out into I'll use just the example of Walmart here. Walmart has, let's say, in Mexico, around 300 people whose full-time job it is to go out and solicit permits. And then, multiply that by all the other companies that have been participating in the America's Business Dialogue, and we have thousands and thousands of people with a lot of expertise in what really happens in the permitting context. We've gone out and asked those people within our company, what are the things that really make a difference for you that a company does? The World Bank has done tremendously good work in their doing business rankings of identifying, 2 of the 11 components of doing business are about permits and licenses. So that's a very high percentage. They've done really good work. One of the things that they've done a lot of research on is the importance of categorizing by risk category different types of permitting requirements. You don't ask the same types of permitting requirements of somebody who's intending to store highly combustible materials as you do of, let's say, a tiendita, or a bodega or something like that. So that type of thing, we've gone out and also sought advice on within our companies. And we have a list of 10 best practices that for companies are things that if governments do them at the municipal, state, federal levels, it makes a real difference in how effective permitting is and how free of corruption it is. But that can only be part of the story, right? We need the civil society expertise on that question. And in fact, there is. I've already cited the World Bank, but there's a whole infrastructure around the World Bank that comes from Transparency International and a lot of other NGOs. We have a friend here who represents INCAI. INCAI, as a business school in Central America, has done a lot of work on permitting best practices. We need to have sort of a cross-sector effort to basically all feed into an OAS process that creates the certification. So our specific recommendation is that the heads of state ask the OAS to create, own, and operate a certification, and to solicit from each of the sectors, from civil society, from young Americans, from the business community, input into what best practices should be in that certification. We've done most of our socialization work on the business side, and so we'll be prepared to present 10 best practices and give some of the background on them, but we would be dissatisfied with that if it didn't also include best practices proposed by young Americans, by civil society. So I think in that sense, to answer your question, I feel very enthusiastic about the discussion here because it is leading us toward a holistic approach to this topic.
Great. It's good to see that Rosario's enthusiasm and optimism is infectious. Let's try to spread some of that. Medici, the Odebrecht case has come up. Odebrecht has come up a few times, and one of your colleagues this morning suggested that the question the summit should be trying to answer is, how do we prevent the next Lava Jato? Certainly, it's so present in the atmosphere and the discussions of this issue. What's the answer? I mean, Welby has put some ideas on the table in terms of certification around public contracting. We hear a lot about political finance, which is one of the other issues you mentioned. But if you had to kind of drill down on one or two things that are at the root of that particular grand corruption case, what would you have the summit focus on?
Bueno, no es fácil porque no es una sola decisión o un solo tema el que hay que abordar para superar lo que ha estado pasando en América, bueno, que se expresa claramente con el caso de Odebrecht y Lava Jato, pero que seguramente pues tiene muchos otros protagonistas por allí, ¿no? Mira, como nosotros lo vemos, ese caso es un modelo que se implementó con mucho éxito por muchos años y tenía muchos elementos importantes. Primero, había una relación directa entre las cúpulas del poder político. La relación, como hemos visto, hay acusaciones de relaciones entre los presidentes, Lula y los presidentes de la región, donde el presidente Lula era embajador de la empresa. Entonces, ¿cómo hacemos para tener claridad acerca de los conflictos de interés? Eso es un gran tema en América Latina. Cómo se manejan, cómo se preservan, cómo se impiden que vuelvan a tener ese impacto tan grande y cómo se regulan y cómo se sancionan, cómo hay consecuencias a eso, a los efectos de los conflictos de interés. Pero otro tema, otro elemento de ese modelo es que se lograban grandes obras con sobreprecio. Entonces también allí hay que evaluar, bueno, cómo se asignan, cómo se calculan técnicamente las obras para que pueda pasar por tantos países la contratación con sobreprecio para tantas obras. Ese es un elemento distinto, ¿no? Conflictos de interés, el aporte técnico de la preparación de los prepliegos licitatorios que deben ser públicos y los propios pliegos posteriormente, y toda la asignación, los mecanismos de esa seguramente tienen mucha más información. Bueno, eso tiene que pasar desde reglamentar mejor, o sea, hacer una ley mucho más clara, pero también un procedimiento y una implementación también mucho más clara. Otro elemento de ese modelo que hay que considerar, del modelo Odebrecht particularmente, es que financiaron la política. Hay muchos casos, yo creo que no hay presidente en América Latina que haya salido ileso. A todos los mencionaron por una cosa u otra, y si no los mencionaron a ellos, mencionaron a los jefes de su campaña, ¿no? Entonces, bueno, ahí cómo se regula el financiamiento de la política, cómo se sabe quién financia qué. Otro elemento por supuesto, es la altísima impunidad, o sea, el sistema judicial no estaba presente. ¿Qué pasó con el sistema de Contraloría y de justicia en nuestros países? Los sistemas de Contraloría se hicieron la vista gorda, o no se enteraron, o no les pareció importante. Entonces hay que ver también, entonces hay que analizar qué tiene que hacer o cómo tiene que funcionar el sistema de administración de justicia y el sistema de control, tanto las Contralorías Generales de la República como los propios parlamentos, que tienen una labor importante no solamente haciendo leyes, pero sino haciendo Contraloría. Creo que hay muchos elementos que nos pueden ayudar. Por eso yo esta mañana decía que el ejemplo de Odebrecht, y digo Odebrecht porque es la mamá y el papá de los casos dentro de Lavallato, tiene que servirnos para construir unos sistemas distintos, desde la ley hasta los sistemas de compliance y los sistemas de Contraloría dentro de nuestros países. Creo que es.
Thank you. Rosario, we started the conversation earlier, and Merchi mentioned that she went into this process with low expectations. And certainly, I think the last couple of summits have perhaps met those low expectations, at least in terms of the formal agenda. There were some other things that happened that were certainly significant on a political level. But if we look further back, there have been major accomplishments that have come out of the summits, including the creation of MISESIC and the rapporteurship on freedom of expression, and some of the kind of crucial inter-American institutions that we now count on to bring accountability and transparency to the hemisphere. I guess I'm struck by your optimism as somebody who's coming at this, fairly fresh, looking at this complex kind of multilateral diplomacy, which can be kind of slow and consensus based, and takes a while to clearly produce results sometimes. So what is it that makes you optimistic, that has led you and your colleagues to invest in this process? And what would you consider a sort of success? What would you look at in April and say, this is really worth the investment? What are you hoping that these heads of state will actually accomplish when they get together in April?
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, I know that these processors are actually very complex and try to keep the expectations high regarding the formal process in the current context of the region can be challenging. And I don't know if many people actually is feeling that way. But what keeps me optimistic? I really think that the formal process is a very good opportunity to bring these head of states and push states or government concrete actions. However, what I really think that is a great outcome out of this whole process is this social tissue we are creating. We are creating a social tissue. We are not just gathering in Peru to go and participate of a summit and have a couple of cocktails that it's amazing, but that is not the main thing. We are connecting with each other. We are making alliances. And what does it mean? That this group of people who's involved in this process, as you guys were mentioning before, we are going to be able to articulate. And once we articulate, once youth or civil society thinks, hey, man, I have this great proposal in order to keep the momentum after the summit. And then private sector is going to say, hey, you know what? I want to join because I know what you're doing is actually interesting. And I know what's your agenda. And that's how we collaborate. And then we have two parallel processes. We have the regular and we have the social one, the different actors one. Another thing that keeps me pretty optimistic about this is the fact that these processes do not need to be only connected in a cross-sectoral way. I think that these processes now are starting to be connected in an intergenerational way, which is very, very important. And the other thing that I actually can get out of the previous conversation we had earlier is that we are taking this process not as an independent process itself. We are trying to connect it with other agendas and action or global action plans, such as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and SDGs. How we can make this space to be an add to that existing process. How we can make democracy, transparency, justice, something that is on the table in that process as well. I think one of the things that is even worse than corruption, because that is like the cancer, is the lack of treatment, and that will be impunity. And if we really want to move an agenda against corruption, we need justice. We cannot keep going with an impunity process where different actors are not being processed because of the things they did. And being honest, corruption is the biggest effect. Is maybe not very or strong, or I don't know how to say it. We don't face it sometimes in our regular lives because you know what? We are privileged to be here. The really impact of corruption is faced by those people who actually cannot be here, who are in our countries. And we are the ones that cannot let that people left behind. So that's what really gives me a lot of an optimistic view, because I really think from the work I've been working since some time ago, when I started the Millennials movement, and something that I really like to share this is that the Millennials movement started with my computer and I, with no budget, with nothing. with 100 followers in a social media platform that were actually my parents and my friends and my cousins, maybe. And now, believe me, we have mobilized, or we have benefit with some actions, or we have reached some years ago in Peru, 38,000 Peruvians for one of the biggest global processes at the UN in the adoption of the 2030 agenda. And now we are mobilizing 28 local dialogues in my country. And I wonder how these young people is actually doing this, sometimes without having much money, or because you know what? They actually believe in something. They believe in a social asset. And you need to bet, and you need to start thinking that that social asset is really, or the process of building those social assets is really going to take us to a prosperous environment where private sector, civil society, where governments, where citizens are benefited. And the last thing is that I really would like to to invite you to feel entitled as a citizen. It doesn't matter where you are from. It doesn't matter what are you doing. When you ask for transparency, when you go to your government, and for me it's so shocking when they say, who are you, or where are you coming with to ask for accountability? We are going there because we are citizens. And we are the base of the societies. And with that entitlement, we are looking for transparency. We are looking for the budget to be allocated in the way it has to be, without affecting anyone.
Terrific, thanks. We're almost out of time, but I promised time for questions. So I'm going to take one question from each section of the audience and give our panelists time for response and any final observations. Maria Jose.
Thanks. Is it on? Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to speak in Spanish as well, if that's fine. Muchas gracias a los panelistas, a la invitación del diálogo. Mi nombre es María José Eva, yo trabajo como encargada de programas para las Américas de IBP, International Budget Partnership. Trabajamos como sociedad civil junto con organizaciones de la región y de todo el mundo en materia de transparencia presupuestaria, y entre el trabajo que hacemos es específicamente la generación de una encuesta de presupuesto abierto que, como Merchi mencionaba, se hará pública la semana que viene. Esta es la sexta versión de la encuesta. Y un poco pensando en el tema de transparencia presupuestaria, yo quería volver a lo que recién Rosario estaba mencionando y Merchi también había presentado previamente. Al centro de las decisiones del gobierno está la política fiscal, y la política fiscal es la que determina cómo se levantan los recursos públicos y cómo se utilizan esos recursos públicos. Y desde esa perspectiva, desde IBP, creemos que en la medida en que se avanza por la transparencia presupuestaria y al mismo tiempo se avanza en establecer mecanismos a través de los cuales el público pueda participar en procesos presupuestarios, se puede avanzar también en sociedades donde la corrupción se minimiza. En la medida en que los presupuestos nacionales están cubiertos o son secretos ante la ciudadanía, esa capacidad de control que puede tener el público también se disminuye. Y en ese sentido yo quisiera invitar a que la discusión también en el contexto de la cumbre mire aquellas políticas o aquellos aspectos que han estado siempre presentes en los gobiernos, específicamente los aspectos de política fiscal, pero que quizás se reconocen menos o se discuten menos en el contexto de corrupción, anticorrupción, pero que ciertamente están en la base de las discusiones, y yo creo que todos los panelistas de alguna manera han tocado el tema de la transparencia, y creo que en particular el tema de la transparencia presupuestaria se hace crítico al momento de discutir hacia dónde están yendo los recursos públicos y también cómo se levantan los recursos públicos. Lo dejo solo como una idea y, por supuesto, invitar cualquier pregunta o comentario. Muchas gracias.
Okay, let's go in front here.
Rafael Castillo, the Venezuelan American Leadership Council. Especially the ambassador and Merche, you guys mentioned about the OAS creating a relatoría on la CIDH to counteract corruption. I don't know if it's me being Venezuelan and have not seen the Venezuelan presidency or dictatorship, not taking those sentences that come out of the CIDH seriously, how is this going to help when we're seeing that mostly the people who are being accused of corruption are government and are the ones who are supposed to implement those actions? How are we going to have a new process for the OAS to be able to implement those types of measures? Because, as we see, as I mentioned, the governments are going to be at the forefront of the attacks.
Great. Let's go over here. Ambassador in the front.
Eu sou Timoteo Timothy Towell, 50 plus years in the State Department, the Foreign Service. Since I came in, I would talk to, I won't say lecture, dialogue with my Hispanic friends about what Alec Watson and I, we came in together, were in favor of. And if we couldn't remember, we put it on a piece of paper, put it in our pocket. What do I have on my paper? Justice, elections, democracy, Madam Ambassador, freedom, rule of law, transparency, no cocaine transiting, no money laundering. Question, what did I forget? Corruption. So what's my question to my Hispanic colleagues? I don't want to hear from you Yankees, please. How can we talk to you? I won't say lecture as we did 50 years ago. How can we dialogue with you about corruption when reportedly the Free Press of the United States and the world talks about corruption down the street there? How can we hear, or in wonderful Lima, Peru, Madam Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador, how can we even dialogue with you when we have problems of family values and incredible corruption in this land of the free and the home of the brave?
Great. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Medici seems like she's itching to start, so I'll let her. So we've got a comment on budget transparency, a question about the teeth or lack thereof of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which I think we could expand to include MISESIC, given your skepticism over the maybe even less teeth in MISESIC, and a question about the role of the U.S. In the summit process. Medici, we'll start with you and go down the line.
Bueno, son muchos temas para hablarlo en un minuto, pero somos escépticos en una reforma del MESISIC para mejorarlo, porque la mejor reforma que puede tener un mecanismo como el MESISIC sería que tuviera dientes, o sea, que tuviera posibilidades de sancionar. Eso nunca lo van a aprobar los países. Entonces, creemos que por la vía de visibilizar el impacto y crear la relación directa entre violación de derechos humanos y corrupción, cómo la corrupción hace ese trabajo, nos podría llevar, por ejemplo, algunos casos a la Corte Penal Internacional, como está tratando de hacer la OEA precisamente con el caso de Venezuela, pero también para visibilizar el impacto que tiene en la gente la corrupción. Creo que mucho de lo que pasa es que en América Latina la gente, bueno, sí, la corrupción le molesta, pero no es de los primeros temas de preocupación, y no es de los primeros temas de preocupación porque es una cosa que hacen por allá o yo me aprovecho de ella. Yo la hago instrumental. Entonces, en la medida en que podamos visibilizar exactamente cómo impacta la vida de cada uno de nosotros, por ese lado de la visibilización de la violación de derechos humanos, creemos que puede tener mayor movilización de la gente, que no entendemos la lucha contra la corrupción sin la movilización de la gente, ¿no? Los gobiernos pueden ser, hay algunos maravillosos, no quiero hablar mal de nadie, sino del mío nada más, pero la verdad es que si no hay presión ciudadana, si no hay conciencia ciudadana, pues no va a ser permanente. Yo quiero aprovechar para decir que tenemos pocos días o pocas semanas para realmente llegar a un acuerdo, y sí hay mucha gente participando. Creo que el gran reto es saber en qué temas vamos a hacer foco, y creo que entre las organizaciones internacionales con gran presencia en toda la región, como el diálogo y las organizaciones y las coaliciones regionales, Se debería también trabajar en, bueno, ver qué temas pueden ser transversales a todos. Creo que justicia es transversal a todos, acceso a la información es transversal a todos, y creo que presupuesto, y como lo mencionaba muy bien dicho María José, el tema de fiscalidad, porque no es solamente cómo se gasta, sino cómo se cobra, cómo entra el dinero. Y creo que bueno, hay otros temas seguramente que son transversales, pero yo diría que es justicia, fiscalidad, temas de recursos, que seguramente a los abogados y a los politólogos y sociólogos no les gustan mucho los números, pero es vital meterle el diente allí, y acceso a la información son temas que deberíamos estar considerando. Y soy muy escéptica en la posibilidad de que los gobiernos realmente aprueben medidas de transparencia reales en campañas y políticas y partidos políticos. Bueno, porque va contra su esencia, ¿no? O sea, qué político se niega a recibir dinero en una campaña? ¿Qué partido no moviliza todos sus intereses para ganar espacio y elecciones? Me parece que ese es un gran reto que tenemos, en donde la ciudadanía tiene el gran papel allí.
I appreciate the question and also the work of the International Budget Partnership, and I guess I'll expand a little bit from the transparent budgeting context to a little broader open data, transparent governance, so a broader context. And just as, an example of the connection between the work that the Americas Business Dialogue has been doing in the Regulatory Cooperation Working Group and what you were asking, 4 of the 10 best practices that we've identified as a private sector for permitting anti-corruption relate to open data and transparency. The first of them is that there be online rules. I worked in Peru back in the period in which the tupas were all being rolled out, and just that idea of businesses and other users of government services being able to see online what are the actual regulatory requirements and processes is critical, and nowhere more so than in being able to see transparently how the budget works. But in our regulatory context, having online rules for permitting. Second, online tracking of regulatory process, so that you can actually go on and see where things are in the process, which helps put pressure on those bottlenecks that are bottlenecking due to corruption. Because if you can see that things are being held up at certain phases in the process, and it's always the same folks, you start to wonder, do they have a really hard process, or are they corrupt? A third aspect is that the mitigation requests made of construction companies and others that have impactful projects, the impact mitigation requirements of government be transparent, in particular be published, so that you can see what government is asking in that space that currently is essentially ad hoc regulation, so that instead of it being ad hoc, it's at least transparent. And fourth, that there be an ombudsman role somewhere in the government, so that you can go to someone in particular to identify problems in the process, corrupt officials or phases in a regulatory process where there are continually holdups and in a way that raises suspicions. So that's 4 of 10 of our best practices in the permitting context, all going back to the idea of open data and transparency.
Thanks. I don't know if it's working. Yes, it is working. Well, I will like just to make maybe some last remarks on the things that I have been hearing from you and from the questions and from the previous interventions, and the fact about how we are minimizing corruption in the region. That is something that really comes to my mind, because sometimes and I have heard this in, in regular conversations, such as like, oh, because we have the culture of corruption. And let me tell you something. My region is more than that. I don't really think we should allow the corruption be part of the culture of this region. We can really provide more than that to the citizens. Another thing that I caught my attention was how so we are fighting against corruption and we are making proposals, and we have this regular channel or path of consensus. But it's also important to think about the political systems in the region. How are they going to work? How are they going to be found? How this funding is going to be transparent, or what are the mechanisms to ask for accountability process regarding this funding? And most important, how the democracies are working in the region. Because we have non-direct democracy going on in the region, which means that regular citizens, we are not the ones who are raising our hands and are saying this person is going to be the mayor. We are actually choosing from the ones that political parties are proposing us to choose from, and who these people are bringing there, and how we can promote through transparency, through anti-corruption policies, through citizen engagement or citizen empowerment processes, that these people who are that have been selected by political parties, that had been who are running and maybe are being financed by other actors, are actually the accurate people to be leading our communities. Some last things, it will be that and I'll go back to a comment I did before, sometimes we don't see the effects of corruption right in our noses because, we are here. But then I started thinking, and now I'm questioning myself. You know why? Because when you are in Peru, maybe you live in a very nice house, but when you go out and you are in the street and you don't see a good transport system, and you see that young people cannot have the same education if they go to a public school because of the budget, because of the money that is supposed to be allocated to those sectors is not well used, or is being lost in the process of corruption. That's when you see really what are the effects of corruption, because we are then living in poverty, because that's poverty. Poverty is not only having less money in your pockets. And that's how you see the effects of corruption. When you don't know if in Peru maybe or in other countries you will have, I don't know if I don't hope this happen ever, but a car accident, and then you don't know what's going to happen if you go to a public hospital. Those are the things. Finally, I would really like to add to this. As I said before, in a non-peacefully environment, there is not a space for development. But in order to have a peaceful environment, we really need justice, and we really need inclusion. Because it's not just about some actors, it's also about women, it's also about young people, it's also about elderly, it's also about indigenous communities, it's also about everyone, because we all need this. So I think that would be like the closing remarks.
Thank you. Ambassador, last word for you.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Actually, I would like to finish with some practical comments, and it's regarding the preparation process. As I told you, preparation of the summit has started, and there's different meetings that are taking place. And I would urge all of you that have mentioned specific proposals, just parentheses. Actually, many of the proposals that have been mentioned have been included by some states already as recommendations. We don't know what the document will be, but they have been mentioned already in the preparation meetings. But there's other new proposals that are being mentioned today. So I think it would be very interesting since we only have 2 months to go to the summit, that we would be able to get those proposals, be it to the Peruvian presidency or through this civil society dialogue, the business dialogue, or eventually that civil society presents it to a certain country so that they can take over that proposal and present it at the government meeting, which is going to take place in February. And yes, to inform you that in infrastructure, we have a meeting taking place on Wednesday 7th, I think, or 6th, and it's a workshop that La CAF is giving on infrastructure and anti-corruption practices. So, okay, this is symbolic, but I think it's the way forward, how we're going to educate, to prevent, and how we're going to systematize an experience of anti-corruption practices that take, I think, all in consideration, most of what has been presented here. And finally, the government of Peru would like to adopt concrete commitments. How do we make commitments concrete? And that's a very big challenge. And that's what we are trying to bring forward. We hope we can get to those commitments, even if they are endorsed by 2 or 3 countries. But that's our aim. And thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't say we envy your task in bringing this all together. We certainly commend your leadership in taking on this challenge and this issue which animates the hemisphere at the moment. So, and we'll be here, I think, every step of the way to support you and try to inform the process. Please join me in thanking our excellent panelists. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.